Hare Krishna, everyone. Thank you so much for your patience. I was just trying to go live on Facebook there. So today we are joined by Nritya, Pria, Radha, Mataji. So Nritya, Pria, Radha, Mataji has been practicing Bhakti for several years now, and she's been inspiring many individuals to take up Krishna consciousness, and then while in Krishna consciousness, really engage them in service and to go deeper. And she successfully run 12 Bhakti Vrishka groups, which meet up regularly to discuss Krishna consciousness, and most recently for the deaf community. She organizes many retreats, and she always tries to make sure that everyone that attends the retreats is engaged and participates and gets little wisdom nuggets to take home with them for their families. And her day job is a senior role as a project manager. And shortly in December, she'll be starting the book marathon. So if any of you want any information about the book marathon or would like to help at all, if you can just contact Madame Prabhu, Dharmendra Prabhu, or myself, and then we can get you in touch with her. And over to you, Mataji.
Thank you, Rohana. That's very kind of you. Thank you for the kind words. Hare Krishna, everyone. So nice to see you all. I think I know some of you. I can see some familiar faces here and familiar names as well. So yeah, today we will be covering Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 1, Chapter 4, right? Dharmendra Prabhu, Rohana Mataji. Okay, we are covering the appearance of Sri Narada. And what we will do is we will start off with our usual prayers, Radha Mother prayers. Does anybody like to repeat, or I can just sing on my own? I mean, I don't know what is your format because we have 1 hour. So you tell me, how do you want me to go about this?
Whatever you prefer, Mataji. We'll leave it to yourself. Thank you.
Okay,
Hare
so
Krishna.
I can just do like some prayers, and I can do it on myself because, of course, we are on online, so it's difficult to follow. But yeah, you all can probably, of course, stay on mute and join me. And if you know the prayers, sing it on your end. And otherwise, you know, just absorb yourself in the name of the Lord. And after that, yeah, I think I will have the sharing rights, right? I will have it because I've got a little presentation I can share with you all, and then we can take it from there. Jaya Radha Madhava, Jaya Kunja Vihari, Jaya Radha Madhava, Jaya Kunja Vihari, Jaya Gopi Jana Vallabha, Jaya Girivaradhari, Jaya Girivaradhari, Yashodanandana Vraj Janaranjana, Yashodanandana Vraj Janaranjana, Yamuna Tira Vanachari, Yamuna Tira Vanachari, Jaya Radha Madhava, Jaya Kunja Vihari, Jaya Radha Madhava, Jaya Kunja Vihari. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Krishna Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna Hare Hare, Hare Rama Hare Rama, Rama Rama Hare Hare. Jaya Radha Gokulananda Radha, Gokulananda Radha, Gokulananda Shri Radhe. Jaya Jagannath, Jaya Jagannath, Jaya Baladev, Jaya Subhadra, Jaya Sita Ram, Lakshman Hanuman, Jaya Sita Ram, Lakshman Hanuman. Jaya Gauranitai, 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 Jaya Gauranitai, Jaya Jaya Prabhupada, 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 Jaya Jaya Prabhupada, Jaya Jaya Prabhupada, 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 Jaya Jaya Prabhupada, Nitai Gaura Hari Bol, Hari Bol, Hari Bol, Nitai Gaura Hari Bol. Shri Radha Gokulananda Ki Jai. Shri Prabhupada. Hare Krishna. So before we start getting into this these deeper topics of Srimad Bhagavatam, of course it's incomplete. It won't be auspicious to start without the prayers and the blessings of our acharyas. So let's get together to pray to our acharyas, beg for their mercy for us to give us that understanding that we can understand these purports, we can absorb them, and most importantly, we can apply them. So we do the Mangalacharan, and after that, we can start going into the chapter. Om Jnanatimirandasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshurunmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Shri Chaitanya Manobhishtam Sthapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kathamayam Dadati Swapadantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Yuta Padakamanam Shri Gurun Vaishnavamsha Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahagana Raghunathanvitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sagana Lalita Shri Vishakhanvitam Shah. Hey Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dinabandhu Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostate Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vrishabhanusute Devi Pranamami Haripriye Vanchakalptarubhasya Kripa Sindhu Bhayevacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha. Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shri Vasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda. Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. Mukam karoti vachanam Pangum langayate girim yat kripatam Vande Shri Guru Dinatarinam Paramananda Madham Shri Chaitanya. Hare Krishna. Okay, let me see who all are there. Nice to see so many of you. Okay, so let's just start on. Let me just start sharing my screen, and then we can take it from there. Now, before we start, so has any one of you managed to read chapter 4, Canto 1, chapter 4? Have you had a glimpse of what it is like? Anyone? I mean, it's not a test, don't worry, but we're just trying to see, how to take it from here. So anybody tried to read a few things, some purports, some few words before coming on the session?
I read it, but not before coming to the session. I read it maybe 1 week ago.
Hare Krishna Prabhu, yeah, thank you. Yeah, no problem, that's fine.
It's yeah, up to chapter 10 now, so don't obviously need to go back to remember everything.
Yeah, so anyways, these are scriptures. We, of course, first reading is always the skimmed reading, as they say, but every time we read, that's when we get the messages, more clearer and clear. So this is the beauty with reading the scriptures. When we read them, every time we read, they are like ever fresh. Because every time we read, we find some new messages. Srila Prabhupada says that The more we read, the more we'll get the message. And of course, all of this coupled with our chanting, it purifies our consciousness to be able to absorb these messages, as we read them more. So chanting and actually reading, they both help. Anybody else? Anybody would like to add a few words before we move on to understanding what is here? Anyone, any thoughts? Okay, never mind. Let's start going through it and we'll keep it interactive. Okay, so you really don't have to wait for me to finish till the end. If you have any thoughts, any reflections, any questions, so please feel free to ask. And we probably just do it in a bit ordered way. You could raise your hand and then, we could go through that just so that we don't disturb the flow with everyone is following. So this is Canto 1, Chapter 4, Appearance of Sri Narada. And the picture that you see here, can you recognize the picture? Who are the two personalities in this picture? You can type your answer if you don't want to speak. I'm okay with that as well.
Obviously, Narada and Vasudeva.
But Narada and Vyasadeva. Okay, so the personality standing here with folded hands is Vyasadeva, and of course the one with the veena, with the instrument is Narada. And this is the final actually part of this chapter. So this painting has been kind of built on that point when Narada just arrives in front of Vyasadeva. Okay, so we will go through that why did Narada appear and Sri Narada appeared, and what was he trying to give the message to Vyasadeva. Okay, let's move on. So what we will do is we will cover 3 things today, and this is actually the recommended way of how we read the scriptures. Okay, the first thing is we always have to understand the context. What is the background? What is the flow? And particularly with the scripture like Bhagavatam, which is very intertwined. It's multiple characters in Bhagavatam, and it's always flowing like from one story, one pastime within one pastime within one pastime. So there is a point when actually, I think it's somewhere in Canto 4 or somewhere that, you actually have 3 layers of people narrating it. So you have the first layer where Shukadeva Goswami is narrating to Parikshit Maharaj. Then we have the second layer where Sutta Goswami is narrating to the sages, and then we have this conversation between Narada Vyasadeva. Then we have the Vidur and Maitreya Muni, and like this, we come. There are 4 or 5 layers. Ultimately, at some point it gets so deep and it keeps going inside. So it's always good to understand what is the context, where are we coming from, what has happened so far. So we'll quickly go through that. Then we'll see who are the characters in this particular chapter. Like I said, there are so many personalities, so it's always good to understand who are the characters. And then we will see what are the key messages that this particular chapter is giving to us, to that we should be picking up and we should be absorbing. Okay, so let's go to what is the background, what is the context that we are talking about here. So now this is Canto 1, 4th chapter. So how many chapters have we covered so far? Anyone? How many chapters we have covered so far?
Up to 6 chapters we done.
No, so far. This is the 4th chapter. So far, how many chapters we have seen? What we have read in this Learning Bhagavatam session? I think it's science, it's maths actually. It's not anything.
No. So in this Thursday lesson we done up to 3, and then this 3. Is the 4th.
Absolutely. So we have
on
done.
Tuesday we're covering where we've done up to 6 in Tuesday.
Okay.
That's what I mean.
Yeah. So no problem. So that's what. So we have done 3 chapters. So let's look at what these 3 chapters have given us, the summary, right? So in the first chapter, we hear that the sages have come together in the holy Tirtha, in the holy Dham of Naimisharanya. They are here they get together to do a sacrifice for the masses, for the benefit of the mankind. And then, of course, when there is an assembly of Vaishnavas, there is always a discussion, there is always question answers, because Vaishnavas by nature, they are always thinking of, how to benefit others. That is the heart of the Vaishnava is how I can help others, how I can think of the welfare of the others. So sages gathered together, and that was all about the first chapter. Then in the second chapter, then Sutta Goswami, he starts glorifying the whole practice of devotional service. So you see in Bhagavatam, it's bang on straight to the point from the very first canto, almost the very first few chapters. It's not like Bhagavad Gita, where Krishna is talking about, okay, karma yoga, and then he's talking about jnana yoga, and then he comes to bhakti yoga, and then, it's not like where in Bhagavad Gita, Krishna is going through different processes and trying to make Arjun realize that, okay, you can do this, you can do that, you can do this, you can do that. But ultimately, yes, devotional service is the best thing. But here in Bhagavatam, we start off with that understanding that we are now looking at the topmost process of devotional service, which is the only remedy in order to be freed from the material world, from the pangs of the material world. And then finally, we do go to chapter 3, because there are a lot of questions that are asked in the first 2 chapters. So then Sutta Goswami, he gives a summary. So he talks about various incarnations of Lord Krishna. He explains how Bhagavatam has so far happened. So he gives this whole chronology that Vyasadeva spoke to Shukadev Goswami, then he spoke to Parikshit Maharaj, and then he introduces that he was sitting there, he was a witness of that conversation between Shukadev Goswami and Parikshit Maharaj, and this is how he has gathered this knowledge. So now we are at a point that it's actually back to the sages again. So Sutta Goswami has spoken, but now we are at a point where the sages, it's back to them to start asking questions, to start knowing about it. And this is where exactly the chapter 4 begins. And which is why in chapter 4, maybe if you haven't read so far, you can always go back and read. I think it's only about 33 verses. It's not very long. You see that it starts off with very basic questions about Bhagavatam, And so the sages have a representative called Shaunak Rishi, and then he starts asking questions about that. So let's move on. We've got a setting now where now the ball is back to the sages for them to start asking questions. So let's now look at who are the characters here. So anybody would like to make kind of just share if you have kind of heard about chapter 3, or even if you have chapter 4, sorry, or even if you have recited it, any thoughts about who are the main characters in this particular chapter?
Narad Muni.
Narad Muni, okay. Who else do we have?
Vyasadeva.
Vyasadeva, okay. So the first character that we see here is Vyasadeva, because it begins about, he's the one who's written Srimad Bhagavatam, he's narrating. So the first verse is about what Vyasadeva is speaking. And then it moves on to who are the other characters. So we've had Narad Muni, we've had Vyasadeva. There are 2 more characters there that we have to talk about.
Sutta Goswami.
Sutta Goswami. And who else do we have? If you can make out from this picture. So this is a picture where you see Sutta Goswami sitting here, and this is Shaunak Rishi, who's standing here as the representative of all the assembled sages, who is being kind of designated to ask questions on behalf of them. And this is something that Prabhupada explains in the very first few verses of chapter 4, that who is the one who is authorized to actually, what are the qualities of a person who kind of takes on this responsibility on speaking on behalf of others. And Prabhupada explains that the main quality of that character is that he's a learned man. He's a learned man who has already realized himself and can actually think and pray for the benefit of the others. So this is Sutta Goswami and this is Shaunak Rishi. And then we, of course, have Narad Muni, who appears exactly at the last verse of chapter 4. You know, it's just like when Vyasadeva is making prayers, he appears to kind of get rid of his doubts, his dissatisfaction, and the plethora of emotions that he's going through while he's having this. So is everyone with me so far here? Okay, so now just a very brief summary. So like I said, the sages have gathered, they are asking questions. So in that process, they have appointed Shaunak Rishi as the main person who will be asking questions on their behalf. I mean, you can see how there is so much of respect and etiquette in this whole pastime that, others are sitting and they are allowing their elders and the learned personality in the assembly to get up and speak on their behalf. And then, of course, Shaunak Rishi, he gets up and he kind of posts a different, a variety of questions to Suta Goswami. He's like, can you tell us how this whole Bhagavatam, came into, what happened actually? Because, we are talking about Shukadev Goswami, who's a very elevated personality, who's got nothing to do with this world, who's always traveling, who's given up everything. But here he sits with someone for 7 days and 7 nights, and he's actually giving this message. So what was so peculiar about that circumstance is that, like, in one of the purports, Prabhupada explains that saintly man does not actually spend a lot more time with a grahastha than which is actually equivalent to milking a cow. So this is how it is, that why did somebody like Shukadev Goswami, who's so renounced, how come he ended up spending something like 7 days, 7 nights, with a personality like Parikshit Maharaj? And not only that, why is somebody like Parikshit Maharaj, who's a Raja Rishi, who's like whose kingdom is absolutely full of all opulence and every possible comfort that everybody can think of, who has such a high character, such a high dynasty, what happens that he kind of gives up everything? What are those life-defining moments? We would like to know more about it. So, so of course, there is curiosity. There is a message that, now Krishna has created this whole pastime that would ultimately be kind of delivered for the benefit of the mankind in future. So then Suta Goswami starts to explain. He starts off with how Vyasadeva, he's a very learned personality, and we know that he is carrying all the Vedas, but then it's the start of Kali Yuga. And before Kali Yuga began, none of the scriptures was actually written. Everything was actually passed on through Shruti, through voice. Like if I'm talking to you, people would not be making any notes. You would speak, I would hear, and I would be able to absorb. That was the power of the memory. That was the power of the intelligence that people in other yugas had. But in Kali Yuga, we will not have all this. He could see that people will not be able to, they would be lazy. They wouldn't have enough intelligence. They would not have enough life, and most importantly, they will be constantly in the mode of passion and ignorance. That is the main thing that would bother each and every individual who's in Kali Yuga. They wouldn't be in the mode of passion. And all of this as a combined effect, the one thing that Vyasadeva sees is that it would bring in faithlessness in people in Kali Yuga, which is very, very, and we see all these traces around us. There is no faith in spirituality. So he's what he thinks of that, okay, fine, let me start, assimilating all this information in a way which will be very useful and easy to absorb for those who are living in Kali Yuga. So he divides the Vedas into 4 parts, then he creates the Puranas, then he creates the Mahabharata. So there's a whole range of, scriptures that he puts together for the benefit of mankind. And this is where, when he has done all this, but he gets to a point that I'm not happy. I'm still feeling something is missing. We all go through those moments in our lives that we work so hard, we bring everything together and we think, okay, fine, I'm done and dusted. But then no, that's not enough. We are still, there's still something missing and we don't know what is that. So then, of course, he's talking to himself, he's reflecting, and then Vyasadeva reaches to a conclusion that the main reason I am not feeling satisfied is because I have not written or I have not put together the words that glorify Krishna, that talk about the devotional service of Krishna, which is the highest form of practice. Why does, I mean, I'm sure, like, you know, you all have been kind of reading some sort of text or everything, but why is it devotional service is the highest form of practice? What makes it so different from other forms of practice? Just so that we can take a pause, reflect on this, because the rest of what we will cover in this session would be really dependent upon why is devotional service such a high form of practice. Any thoughts? Yes, Hema, would you like to say?
You're giving a part of yourself.
You're giving a part of yourself, but what makes you give a part of yourself? What is that real emotion that drives us?
Compassion.
Compassion, okay. Pallavi?
Unconditional love, surrenderance.
Surrenderance, yes. So, I mean, you're both right, absolutely. But yes, love is the driving factor in the whole, I would say, in the whole emotion of devotional service and practice. And if you see, Prabhupada explains that the only emotion that gets closest to devotional service in material world, the only relationship that gets closest to that is the love between the mother and the child. That is the closest that you can see, you know, I would say the height of love that is expressed in that relationship. But then he goes on to add, but that also is very limited because the mother only loves her own child. So that love is also not unconditional. So you can imagine, so now we are talking of a relationship where there is unconditional love, and that love actually makes us, like what Hema says, give a part of us, or what Pallavi is saying, it, you know, it allows us to surrender, because with love comes faith, with love comes everything that we want to, you know, it's very natural. You would see in your life, think about the person you love the most. In your head, you can think about the person you love most, and you would really want to do anything to make them happy. Whether it's our partner, our spouse, our children, our parents, our friends, but we just want to make them happy. And this is what is the driving force behind the whole practice of devotional service. Love is the driving force. So now let's see what happens after this. So we have come to a point now where Narad Muni has kind of appeared in front of Vyasadeva. And of course, then there will be more about their conversation in the forthcoming chapters. But what I would cover for now is what Vyasadeva was going through, what Shaunakrishi and Sutta Goswami were talking about. And there are some key messages that we can take up from these past times. You know, whenever we read scriptures, we should always kind of try to summarize that what is it that Krishna is trying to tell me through this past time? What's the message for me? What I can take back and actually apply, and how I can then help use that to improve my relationship with Krishna, with devotees, with community, with everyone around me, and overall make myself more spiritually uplifted. You know, every moment, every hour, every day, every week, every year, you know, we should be working or acting in a way that ultimately it improves our relationship with Krishna. So let's look at some of the key messages, okay? Okay. So anyone has any thoughts, again, any reflection on what, before I get into the key messages that I'll be showing you here? Do you have any thoughts on that when you probably heard about this chapter or when you probably read about it, there was something that really stuck with you? We can cover that off for the next 15 minutes and then we can open up for Q&A. Anyone? Okay, no worries. So let's see what is the first message that, you know, and then maybe you can help me to actually expand on this one first. Okay, yeah. So the first message that we see here, and this is all actually given in Prabhupada's purpose. If we read the purports carefully, this is all coming from the purports. This is nothing that I have concocted or I have put together or it's my intelligence. This is all Prabhupada words. All we have to do is to look for these jewels, when we are reading these books. So the first thing that Srila Prabhupada and, these pastimes, they explain us is the perfect way of hearing, asking questions and sharing Bhagavatam with others. How do we do that? Now, Prabhupada answers this in one of the purports. And this is actually answered in the first 2 purports of this particular chapter. So I need some volunteers here. Maybe if I need 2 volunteers here to read these 2 passages. Anyone can come forward, please. Anybody would like to read what is shown on the screen? Yes, Pankaj Prabhu. Yes.
So the perfect way of Hare Krishna, I'll read the first one.
Yeah.
The perfect way of hearing, asking questions and sharing Srimad Bhagavatam with others. So the personal realization does not mean that one should, out of vanity, attempts to sow one's own learning by trying to surpass the previous acharyas. He must have full confidence in the previous acharyas, and at the same time, he must realize the subject matter so nicely that he can present the matter for the particular circumstances in a suitable manner. The original purpose of the text must be maintained. No obscure meaning should be screwed out of it, yet it should be presented in an interesting manner for the understanding of the audience. No learned man should be willing to hear a person who does not represent the original acharyas. Unless the situation is created, Bhagavatam recitation for extraneous purpose is useless labor, both for the speaker and for the audience.
Thank you, Prabhu. Thank you so much. So see what Prabhupada is saying here, that if the last sentence is very, very important here, which says that unless the situation is created, Bhagavatam recitation for extraneous purposes is useless labor, both for the speaker and audience. So unless we have a kind of a speaker who has personally realized it and who is presenting the, like as they say, Prabhupada, as it is, the original purpose of the text is not lost. And there's no man-made or concocted versions of it, which is what we see. There is so many versions, of the scriptures that we see around. And honestly, I have realized in some situations talking to different people, like, on book distributions and generally in the temple, that I have seen people have actually lost faith in the scriptures. One of the reasons is because they see so many versions and they don't know which is a bona fide version. And this is the reason I think we really should be having our heartfelt gratitude to Srila Prabhupada to give us these, purpose, to give us these scriptures, and they have not been actually deviated. There is not even an iota of deviation in these scriptures. He's just presented them as it is. So yeah, so please make sure, while you are in the association of devotees, or whoever you are reading, and make sure that we are reading books, the scriptures, the purports, the translations, the meanings, which are authentic, which are bona fide, and which are as it is. I mean, I remember I was one time on a book distribution, I knocked on her door and I said, I've got some Bhagavad Gitas, would you like to have? And then it's a very common answer sometimes we hear, going to Indian families, and they say, no, we have it. We have it. We know it and we have it. And so then I thought, okay, what is it? And then one time I asked someone, I said, do you have this Bhagavad Gita? I showed him that orange Bhagavad Gita from Srila Prabhupada, and I said, do you have this one? He says, no, I don't have this one. And then we got into a discussion. Then I showed him that how Prabhupada's Bhagavad Gita, at least that's the only Bhagavad Gita I have seen. I don't know if anybody on the call has seen some other version. The only Bhagavad Gita where what you see is the verse in its original language, then verse in English language so that people can read it. People who don't know Sanskrit can actually also read it. Then you have a word by word meaning. So he's broken it up, he's picked up each word, he's given the meaning of each word. Then you have the translation, and then you have the purport. So imagine you have like 4 or 5 layers of the information which is kind of presented to you. I mean, and who would make such a, such kind of an effort to give you, because and if you go through that systematically, pick up any words from any book and just go through that systematically, and you will realize that the genuinity is flowing through it. Because he doesn't need to explain that, it's not just, okay, there's this translation and that's it, but he's actually even broken it up, So who would take that effort? So we really owe that. One of the reasons we all understand Bhagavatam is because, the people who we are hearing from, they are repeating the words of the Acharyas, which are the real words. And that is why it makes a difference in our heart. It makes a difference in everyone's heart, because these are the words from a pure devotee like Srila Prabhupada. So that's it. So that's a perfect way of, like, as they say, hearing, asking questions, and sharing Srila Bhagavatam. Pallavi, you wanted to read the second one? I saw you raise your hand.
Yes, sure. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Sutta Goswami is twice addressed herein by Shaunaka Goswami out of great joy, because he and the members of the assembly were eager to hear the text of Bhagavatam uttered by Sukadeva Goswami. They were not interested in hearing it from a bogus person who would interpret in his own way to suit his own purpose. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Thank you. So yeah, again, it is the genuinity of the speaker, the genuinity of the hearer, which is being, which is being addressed here. It is not for, like, as Prabhupada says, for any purpose, for any material benefits. It is simply delivered for the purpose of, benefit of the mankind. That is all. Any questions so far? Because we'll move on to the last part then. Okay.
So just one,
Yes.
just curiosity is not, I don't know, because we are talking about the time. Probably at that time, the books were not written. Like, they were people used to remember the Bhagavatam by hearing itself, because the memory was that good. The concept of bogus person here, what does that mean? Because people, now we have a lot of books with different interpretation, but we are talking about this context going back at the time of when it was spoken, at that time when it was not too much written context. Did we have the concept of bogus person at the time?
It wasn't actually, but they could see, our acharyas could see that bogus people would be coming, because that's what the age of Kali Yuga is all about, quarrel and hypocrisy. Hypocrisy is like the chief characteristic of Kali Yuga. So, and what the words that you see here, these are coming actually from the purports of Srila Prabhupada, which were written about like 50, 60 years ago. So at that time, of course, Kali Yuga had started. So Prabhupada is expressing. But the reason, I mean, when you read the translation, what Vyasadeva is going through, he can see that the Kali Yuga at its peak would really make it difficult for saintly people, to be able to find out what is genuine and what is not. And this is actually explained even in Kali Santana Upanishad. So that's a conversation between Lord Brahma and Narad Muni there. And actually Narad Muni, this is the point where Kali Yuga is about to start. And this book, it is called as Kali Sant Taran Upanishad. So Kali means Kali Yuga. Sant means the saintly people. Taran means deliverance. So the book is all about how would saintly people deliver themselves in Kali Yuga, because they would be very rare. So how would they survive in a Yuga which is full of quarrel and hypocrisy, where virtues are going to be very low, vices are going to be high. So that's when Narad Muni is very, again, worried, being a pure devotee of the Lord, he's worried how would people in that Yuga manage it. And that's where Lord Brahma comes in and says that if they chant the Hare Krishna Maha Mantra, they will be delivered. So all this is actually given in our scriptures, that the deliverance would happen for us, for saintly people, or people who are actually willing to go towards on a saintly path. That would happen through the help of the Hare Krishna Maha Mantra and through these books like Bhagavad Gita and Bhagavatam. So yes, bogus people, our acharyas and our teachers can see it. Okay, let's move to, this is the last message. I mean, of course, when we read all these scriptures, there are many things that can come out of it. But yeah, the key messages are always related to the one that would benefit not just me, not just you, but it would benefit everyone in the society. Okay, anything else before we move on to the second part?
Hare Krishna Mataji, I've just got a question because we've spoken about hearing the Bhagavatam. And I know we covered how to read the Bhagavatam as well previously, but did you have any recommendations on practically how to read it? So at the moment I'm reading Canto 1, we're going from beginning to end, reading the verses, reading the purports. Obviously there's obviously my memory is not great, so is it recommended that I go back round Canto 1 and just read the verses the next time round before I move on to Canto 2?
Yeah, I think that's a very good question, and that's a very practical question, Jessica. And I would say the different people have different ways of doing it. Okay, but yeah, this is one of the ways. What you're saying, I have heard from some devotees. They try this way, that what they do is they do a first reading of the book. They only read the translations. Okay, because they read the translations because they just want to understand the flow, and that is their first reading. So let's say if you're reading Canto 1, you're reading chapter 1, maybe just go through the translations in the first reading. So what happens is that gives you an idea of the flow of that chapter. Okay, because if it could give you like, okay, this person is coming, this person is saying this thing, this personality is coming, this personality is answering like this. So it gives you like a chain of events. And then what you can do is, of course, this is not a recommendation to skip the purports, because purports are the cream. Prabhupada purports are the cream. We really don't have to miss that. Then in the second reading, you can go back and read the purports. So you read the translations only first, and then come back to the beginning, read the translation, and then read the purports with it. But then other thing I would also recommend, which I personally also do, is to please make your notes. Don't just read it. Prabhupada says that, I don't want my followers to read my books. Prabhupada says, I want my followers to study my books. Okay, so please, when you're having Prabhupada's book in front of you, don't just let's not treat it like an armchair reading. Create that environment where you are, where you have dedicated a time, that this is my time, even if it's just something like 20-30 minutes. It really doesn't mean that you have to sit down with the book for 4 hours, 5 hours, and then just only read. Set a time for yourself, maybe 20 minutes, 30 minutes in the beginning, and that is the time, that is your focused time to study a Prabhupada book. Okay, so make your notes, write down the key points, reflect on it, and then most importantly, discuss it with other devotees, discuss it with your seniors, discuss it with other Vaishnavas, gather their, I would say, gather their reflections as well. So 3 things, do: read, reflect, and discuss. Don't just read it for yourself, otherwise you might end up even, kind of building up some thoughts, and then there's no one to validate what we are reflecting is in the right direction or not. So we need that support system always, I mean, even when we are reading something like school textbooks, there's always something that we go back and check with our teachers, our parents, our friends, or our family, whoever, who you think is kind of, kind of worthy enough, who you think you can kind of trust their judgment and their understanding. Just go. But yeah, read, reflect, and discuss. 3 things. And 4th thing, most importantly, spend a dedicated time, make your notes, go back to your notes, share with everyone. That's what I would say. That. Yeah. And then, yeah, of course, I think, Jessica, in that process, it will reveal to you that what is your best way of, reading Srimad Bhagavatam.
And that's beautiful. Thank you, Mataji.
No problem. Thank you. Okay, any more? Otherwise, we can move on to this last part. We have about 13 minutes left now. Yeah. Okay, I think one of the things that really kind of, sorry, Pankaj Prabhu, you want to ask a question?
Hey, sorry, just on that particular point, what you said. So, yeah, reading translation, purport, making notes. How to improve reading the verses? Because that's something, the area where I would like to read, trying to understand, but I found it difficult to pronounce. And slowly I can read, but getting that into the flow, what's the trick on how can I improve that?
Okay, are you specifically talking about the Sanskrit verses, reciting?
Yeah, the verses reading in the
Yeah.
Sanskrit part
Yeah.
of it.
I had one devotee actually shared with me, I remember, what Bhakti Charu Maharaj said. So Bhakti Charu Maharaj used to say that if you want to learn the verse, then make sure you are kind of reciting it once a week at least. So, so repetition is the key, Prabhu. I would say anything that we want to do, repetition is the key. You can, if you think that the pronunciation is different, again, we can go to the Vaishnavas, we could ask them. We could even play actually Srila Prabhupada reciting those verses. If you go to this website, prabhupadvani.org, that is a website which has most of, I think, verses are there as part of Prabhupada lectures. But yeah, take the help of devotees. I mean, none of us are born Sanskrit experts, So, and language is, of course, a challenging thing. So I think it's very natural. Don't feel bad or embarrassed about anyone asking for help. And there are some people who are very good with Sanskrit. They can help you with that. So reach out, listen, repetition, again and again, hear. And one of the interesting things, I don't know how much would you all believe in this, but I read this in Yamuna Mataji's book, and I try to follow it myself. She used to say that Prabhupada told them that if you want to learn something new, one prayer that you should always do is this Om Agyanati Mirandasya prayer. So Prabhupada used to say that even if you want to learn something material, please say this prayer before you start your endeavor towards that particular practice. And then she writes in her book that there was one Mataji who wanted to learn typewriting. And she actually used to do that even before, like, she would go to learn the typewriting and she would attend those lessons. She would say the Om Agyanati Mirandasya prayer and then started. And since she said she learned typewriting. So, we kind of underestimate the power of the blessings from the Guru, that we have. So prayers, repetition, help. Practically, it means help from others. But yeah, we also need the divine help. Yeah. So please do that. Yeah. And so yeah, hopefully, yeah. Okay, so let's look at what is the last part here that we are trying to reflect on. Now here we are, if you see, particularly the purports, the verses where Vyasadeva is actually talking to himself, you can actually see the love and the compassion that Krishna has, for him, for his devotees. And if we get into these purports, particularly 17 and 18, Prabhupada explains that how, I mean, you can see the Kali Yuga has not even started. There's not even a single person in Kali Yuga yet, but already Vyasadeva is thinking about how to deliver these individuals. Okay, so you can see that 5,000 years ago, or maybe even more than that, Vyasadeva was thinking about how to deliver each one of us. We are about 20 of us on the call, and some, who would be online and on live streaming or somewhere. But our acharyas, our Guru Parampara, they were already thinking that how they would get us out of this ocean of birth and death. So I don't know. I mean, when I read this thing for the first time, I just felt that there's so much of gratitude we owe it to all of them, because if they had not done all this, where would we be? We would still be stuck in our 8.4 million species. So yeah, again, if I can have two volunteers who can read these two passages, and then we can reflect a little bit on those. Jessica, please go ahead.
Yeah. The great sage, who was fully equipped in knowledge, could see through his transcendental vision the deterioration of everything material due to the influence of the age. He could also see that the faithless people in general would be reduced in duration of life and would be impatient due to the lack of goodness. Thus he contemplated for the welfare of men in all statuses and order of life.
Thank you. So you can see here, that how he could foresee And in fact, Prabhupada writes in the purport that you could have an astrologer who can talk about somebody's future. In fact, that's in the next paragraph, somebody who can talk about the eclipses, but then there is someone who can actually tell the future of the mankind. So this is they can already see. And then, he's thinking now, where do I take these individuals? Like I said, he doesn't know any one of us, but he's still thinking about us. So we definitely owe it to all of them. Okay, so let's move ahead, read the second passage, and it will add more context to what we are talking about. Usha, do you want to read?
Hare Krishna. Yes, Mataji. The great sage Vyasadeva could see this by this transcendental vision. As an astrologer can see the future fate of a man, or an astronomer can foretell the solar and lunar eclipse. Those liberated souls who can see through the scriptures can foretell the future of all mankind. They can see this due to their sharp vision of spiritual attainment. And all such transcendentalists who are naturally devotee of the Lord are always eager to render welfare service to the people in general. They are the real friends of the people in general. The greatest philanthropists are those transcendentalists who represent the mission of Vyas, Narada, Madhava, Chaitanya, Rupa, Saraswati, etc. They are all one and the same. The personalities may be different, but the aim of the mission is one and the same, namely to deliver the fallen souls back home, back to Godhead. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Thank
Thank you.
So here we are, Prabhupada is explaining that how people could tell the future, people could foretell the lunar eclipse, but they are still very limited in their knowledge, in their understanding. But then here we have our acharyas, our Guru Parampara, who's talking about the future of the mankind, who's talking about, as he says, the spiritual attainment of the people who would be wandering about in Kali Yuga. So if there's Vyasadeva, if you could see, he divided the scriptures into different parts so that it's more understandable for us. But then he realized that even that is not enough. So he puts together Puranas. Then he realizes, no, there would be some individuals or some personalities who wouldn't even understand the Upanishads, the Vedas, the Puranas. So let me put together Mahabharata, particularly in one purport, actually Srila Prabhupada writes that Mahabharata is even more important than the Vedas, simply because, people who wouldn't understand, they would understand the story format rather than giving them the direct philosophy. So it's like children, when we have to teach them something, we tell them in a story format. We teach them the moral values in a story format. So same way, Vyasadeva could think all this, that, people would not be that intelligent. So let me present to them something in a format of a story, so then they can grasp the message and bring some sort of a morality and some sort of a spirituality into their lives. But they are, and as they say, Prabhupada is very clear and very direct in his words here, that they are the real friends of the people in general. Otherwise, whatever we have. And then we are talking about the Goswamis, they everything is lost, but then Chaitanya Mahaprabhu reveals again, then Goswamis put them together in different scriptures. Then we have Bhaktivinoda Thakur, who kind of reinstates the whole movement with Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. Then we have Bhaktivinoda Thakur, who brings out everything. Then we have Srila Prabhupada, who translates this. So you can see the whole lineage, the whole Guru Parampara is constantly trying to make these literatures, these spirituality accessible to us. And all we have to do is to just simply spend some time to read it and to grasp it and to apply it. It is said that if you want to understand one Veda, actually we have 4 Vedas, but if you want to understand even one Veda, it takes 12 years of our lives. So imagine each one of us, we are going to be spending 50 years if we want to understand all the 4 Vedas. But here we are, we have access to all this literature, and really ask yourself, am I spending enough time? In 24 hours, do I have simply 30 minutes to open up a Srila Prabhupada book and read it. You know, I often tell this to devotees because, you know, sometimes devotees say we don't understand anything, or we're not able to focus and we're not able to concentrate. And I tell this, you know, even if you don't understand anything, simply open up a Srila Prabhupada book for the fact that he was awake all night and writing those books. Just out of a mere respect for that fact, please open the book that Prabhupada was awake all night writing these and translating these books for us. We should just, even if you just do that and open the book, you know, that would also be enough. And there's no reason why, you know, all this, you know, in one of the purpose, in fact, Prabhupada writes that Sutta Goswami actually says that, in fact, when Shaunak Rishi is rather glorifying Sutta Goswami, he says, you have this knowledge, you have this realization because you are a sincere disciple. He doesn't talk about intelligence there. He doesn't talk about any material skills there. He says that only reason you have it because you are a sincere disciple of your Guru. So if we want to understand these scriptures, you know, all we have to do is to be sincere to our gurus, to our parampara, to our acharyas, and the message would directly flow through them, you know. And definitely it will take us up. But like Bhagavad Gita says, there is no loss or diminution here. So we are not at least going back. Even if, you know, like Prabhupada says in spirituality, if you are not going up, you are actually going down. We don't have to be like stagnant water because it starts smelling. We have to keep flowing. We have to keep moving. We have to keep reading. We have to keep ourselves engaged. So here we are. Yeah, that brings us to the end of what I wanted to share with you. Now over to you all.